You are listening to OBP. Hello, everybody. Welcome to season 2 of the Ohio Business Podcast. I'm excited to get this season underway, and we have a great business and entrepreneur here, Amanda Held of Hoofs. You are listening to the Ohio Business Podcast, where we sit down and chat with today and tomorrow's business leaders of Ohio. Thanks for coming on, first off. I'm excited to get this first episode going.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So, if you could start us off, go over Hooves, what their goal is and what their purpose is.
Yeah, absolutely. So the mission of Hoofs is to enlist rescued horses to help veterans transform post-traumatic stress into post-traumatic growth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been around for about 10 years.
10 years. And how did that get started?
Well, one of the things that we teach, that's one of the foundations of our program, is finding out really who you are at an intrinsic level, taking all the things that have happened to you in your life and using all of that to create a purpose that serves humanity. And so Hooves came about through my own personal story. I am an Air Force veteran, and upon getting out of the service, I really struggled to transition. And so through my own struggle, I found a lot of healing in a wild Mustang horse that I adopted when I lived out in Colorado. And that horse really saved my life. And it got me on a path of learning about equine communication and training. And so I did something, right? I had a void, and I did something that worked really well to fill that void. And then upon doing that for myself, I really wanted to share it with the rest of the world, which I think is kind of the root of all entrepreneurship, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's how it really developed. I had my own really moving experience with the horse that I adopted, and I was living in Colorado, and then it actually ended up giving me the ability to leave a marriage and kind of go from playing really small in life to playing very large. Mm-hmm. And so upon moving back to Swanton, I attended a business school, and during that school, I wrote a business plan, and 10 years later, I'm living that plan.
That's a great story. Did you have any background experience with horses at all before that?
So I did. I always joke that I was born with horse DNA. So my parents were city people.
Okay.
Toledo, had zero interest in anything farm or horse related. And at the age of 3, I just started saying horse, and I wouldn't leave it alone. And fortunately, my mom was supportive. So at 3 years old, she found a place that would give riding lessons, and she would drive me 45 minutes twice a week to go ride horses. And I say that was kind of like my gateway, drug, riding lessons. And, by the age of 12, I was really involved in 4-H. And, my parents were, not horse people, but they always really fostered that love that I had, that innate love for horses. So.
Yeah, that's so important as a child, and look what happened. You started a nonprofit charity. That is amazing.
Yeah. Crazy, huh?
Well, so I could not find it on your website. What is the full spelled out abbreviation of Hooves? What does it mean?
It's healing of our veterans equine services.
Okay, that makes sense. So how many veterans do you? I don't know if you would have a spot on number, but how many do you usually help per year? Do you know?
Yeah. So right now we help 60 veterans per year, and then we help also their families. So we have 6 retreats. They're 4 days long, and our season is from April till October. And then we have a 7th retreat that's for any of the spouses of the veterans that also want to get into the program. So, we kind of say our span is about 140 people a year, and 60 of them being the veterans and the rest of them being their family members.
Do you see any growth to expand that amount in the future?
Yeah, so actually it's kind of interesting. We've had a pretty organic growth, slow and steady over 10 years. And it seems like all the right elements have shown up at the right time for us. But I realized last year that I can only help, that many people per year, me personally. And I realized that the need is much greater than that. And so 2020 just being a totally crazy year, we were actually able to pivot in some growth ways. And I certified 6 other people in the method that I created. And so now I have an additional 6 people that know how to facilitate this work. And so our hope is to, after this year of orientation and OJT, to be able to get them to run their own retreats as well, so we can expand the number of people that we can help. And then another area of growth that we experienced this year is community classes. So as you can imagine, through the pandemic and everybody knowing what we do out at Hoofs, we had a lot of people reach out and say, hey, I'm not a veteran, but I'm traumatized. Can you please help me? And unfortunately, my answer was, no, I can't help you because there are enough hours in the day. I'm only one person. But then, I was reflecting on the situation, and I'm like, well, I have all these veterans who have gone through over the past, 3-4 years, and they all know this work and they all have these special talents. So what we decided to do was actually have the veteran alumni start teaching community classes based on whatever their purpose and passion is. Like, for me, it's horses. For Tristan, it's pen making. For Heather, it's art. For Cole, it's knife making. So we have all these classes now, and the veterans are getting entrepreneurial skills. So we're kind of like an incubator to help them live their life on purpose. And then we're also helping the community who is now very traumatized. So it really came full circle for us this year. And the amount of people that we're going to be able to reach is just going to explode in 2021.
Well, I mean, that's great to hear. I mean, you're expanding past veterans as well, just in helping basically any individual that needs that type of service.
Yes, we are.
I mean, that's a great thing you started. Now you're helping beyond what you set out to do. I mean, that's always great to hear.
Yeah, it's really interesting, as you well know, in the life of an entrepreneur, because we are ultimately at the steering wheel making the decisions, and sometimes we have no idea what we're going into or how to do it. So I feel like a lot of us just jump feet first and kind of see what happens. But I think in the later part of this business, I started really learning how to be strategic and intentional, and planning better. And I've noticed in the past 3 years, we've definitely achieved more than what we've planned just by being organized.
Yeah, usually once you start something, it looks totally different what you set out to do in the beginning. Yeah. But the important thing is starting. That's what I really try to emphasize with this podcast is if you get started, it doesn't matter what your background or your story is, but if you just start, it could become something if you work it long enough. You never know. So what was kind of the foundation of Hoofs? What did those first couple of years look like?
The first couple of years, in retrospect, were pretty crazy. I think, as this young, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed entrepreneur, I just didn't have a clue about the real world and what it really takes to build a business. So I, came up with the logo, came up with the website. I put some press releases out to the community, and then I just thought, cool, now people are going to start showing up at my door to do business with me. And obviously that didn't happen. So, I don't really see anything as failure. I just see growth opportunities. So I tried in my mind, based on the knowledge I had at that time, what I thought would work, and it didn't work. And so that forced me, my favorite question in life is, what's this forcing me to do that I'm not otherwise willing to do myself? And so that forced me to start looking into networking groups. And so I learned how to network. I took some classes on networking, business collaboration, and marketing. So, at first I just really had unrealistic expectations. And so it was actually a struggle. And it's interesting because the few veterans that I had gotten out to do the work, I only got out through work, like direct connections. So we actually, my very first client, we tricked him. It was my friend's son. Okay. And he's a Iraq and Afghanistan veteran, very, very heavy trauma. And we were like, hey, we're going to shoot a commercial and we just need you to come out and go through these exercises in the arena, so that we can get other people to come out and do work, and he was like, oh yeah, happy to help. And so I ended up taking him through these exercises, and he didn't say much. He just went through the exercises. He had what I thought were some pretty profound moments from what it looked like, but he didn't say anything. We didn't talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
And so when I first opened the doors, I realized this was 1,000 times harder than I ever thought it would be. And I was like, okay, well, I think I'm just going to give up and go get a job because this is really, really hard. And he caught wind that I was considering shutting down the program, and he called his mom and he was like, you need to tell her that this program saved my life.
Oh, wow.
And, she can't ever stop doing this. Please tell her, don't ever stop, and so for me, that was, the feedback I needed in that moment. In that moment, I made a promise that I would never stop. Didn't mean anything got easier. It just meant that quitting wasn't an option anymore. And, when you take that mindset that failure or quitting isn't an option, it changes a lot. And
and you really need, in some cases, that small amount of feedback to really just keep you on that mission of what you first set out to do. That's really important, I think, as an entrepreneur, is that feedback and that support of what you're trying to build. I mean, you just said it yourself, you might have tried to find another job if that didn't come about. It's funny that you tricked him, though.
Yeah,
It's smart.
It's true. I know. Yeah. It's in hindsight, I'm like, oh, I can't believe I did that. But it was definitely what needed to happen, for sure. And yeah, it's I think a lot of times we don't understand the impact that we're having on people because we're only focused on, business things and growth. And so you might have an interaction with someone and you've had an impact on them, and you never know. And maybe knowing about that impact could be life-changing for you. Like for me, it was. I pretty much guarantee you that if that veteran hadn't reached out and said what he said, I would have given up. But that's all it took. And, it's so easy when we start something to not be all in. It's, oh, well, I'm just going to test the waters over here and I'm going to try it. The first time of failure, you're like, okay, that wasn't going to work. And I think that, really people ask me all the time, like, what do you think the secret is? And I'm like, there is no secret. You chop wood, you carry water, and you don't give up. And you do it every day and you just keep doing it. And then one day you wake up and you're like, wow, I'm successful. And I don't, maybe you don't even know how you got there, but if you don't want to give up or you aren't being challenged, then what you're doing probably isn't that effective.
I've used this analogy before. If it's an analogy or not, I don't know. But I always equate it to, you're basically bashing your head through a wall, and then you're gonna want to give up, obviously, because you're hurting your head, and then eventually you do get to the other side, and it's basically freedom. But it's a tough process, and you got to continually do it every day, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I think it's easy to create these fantasies about what we think we're going to get out of stuff, and then when they don't happen, you just want to give up. But,
so can you touch on what these programs look like, your workshops?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting because, it's not therapy. It's a facilitated process with therapeutic benefits. But in essence, what we do is we bring the veterans out to the farm. They stay for 4 days, and we really take a process similar to, I want to say similar to boot camp, but we strip everyone down to the root of who they are, and then we build them back up from there. Like we don't yet people or anything, but you go to boot camp and you lose your identity, and then you're built into something new, right? And so we kind of reverse that process. And so we use a lot of questioning and facilitation to help people figure out, like, at an intrinsic level, who are you and how do we rebuild your life around who you actually are? Because you are not a military member anymore. You've spent however many years building your identity around this. Now we're going to figure out who you are, and we're going to help you become the leader of your life and your own entrepreneur, so that you can align, all 7 areas of your life with your intrinsic values and drivers, and then to connect that to a purpose that's of service to humanity. So it's very, again, it's really modeled after how I ran my own life. And I took the things that worked and I kind of put them into this package. So they stay on the farm. And so we have some holistic things like yoga and essential oils and different kinds of breath work and things like that. So we teach some nervous system regulation. But we have these 12 lessons that we teach. And then each lesson is paired with an exercise with the horses. So we'll just say, for example, one of the exercises we do is called perception versus reality. And so they have to observe the horses from outside of the pen, and we write down all the traits and characteristics that they see. Like, that one's the leader, that one's the outcast, that one's the jerk, that one's the diva, and they'll put all these labels on the horses. And then we actually go in the arena and have the opportunity to meet and interact with the horses. And 9 times out of 10, it's completely opposite once they're in the arena, what they experience versus what they received outside, So we take that in a metaphor and a teachable moment to say, where in your life are you standing outside the fence making judgments? And what's that costing you? And what happened when you actually got in the arena? What happened when you actually went up to the horse? And how did the horse respond to you? Was it the same as what you thought? Did you approach each horse differently based on your bias? And so we use a lot of teachable moments, and the horses are really cool because they will reflect whatever they see in that person. And the science behind that is that horses are actually non-predatory herd animals. So in order to stay alive, they have to blend in with everyone around them. So when they're in a herd in the wild, if one of them stands out, that's the one that gets eaten by the mountain lion. So they're constantly monitoring their environment and they're blending in. That is their goal. So when you put them in a group of people, those people become their herd. So they're going to scan the body language and all the nonverbal cues of the people. And they're like, okay, well, we're going to act like those people. So if the people are shut down, the horses will be shut down. If the people are anxious, the horses will be anxious. If the people are engaged, the horses will be engaged. So you can see a clear shift throughout the 4 days in how people are showing up in the world. And the horses will start to respond to them better and better and better. And then we're able to facilitate that and say, well, how did you show up when the horse was looking at you? And how did you show up when the horse turned its butt towards you?
Yeah.
So it's a really, really good feedback system for how you show up in the world. And if you do something with the horse and it's effective, chances are it's going to work in the real world, your relationships and communication. And if you did something and it didn't work, like if you tried to grab onto the halter and hold it really tight and drag the horse along with you, where are you doing that in your life? Because how we do one thing is how we do everything, right? And so you can get a really clear read on what's not working and then how you can fix it. And then at the end of the retreat, we help everyone create a new mission, vision, and purpose for their life. So, now that we've cleared all this stuff out of the way, who are you going to be? And when you can be that person, what are you going to do? And when you can do those things, what are you going to have? And when you can have those things, what are you going to give back? And so it's really, we don't overcomplicate it, but it's just our new mission for life. And then when they leave here, they can start connecting everything that they do and building all the areas of their life around that mission and vision. And, we see people that have come here that think about suicide all day, every day. They're totally depressed, go on and start their own businesses or, get involved with a cause that's just totally life-changing and transformational. So it's pretty inspiring.
That is, yeah, inspiring. And also that's a powerful exercise. Like I would actually love to be a part of that. I would love to see
Yeah,
how
you should come to the farm sometime. We'll go out with the horses.
that'd be amazing. Where are you located?
We're in Toledo.
Toledo. Okay. I mean, I go to Toledo all the time. I'm in Columbus, but yeah, I gotta check it out at least because I used to go to Tennessee a lot, and I used to have this horse I loved. And man, I haven't been on a horse since I was a kid.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
How do you find the veterans to come into the workshop in the camp and what's that process look
So
like?
a lot of our intake is word of mouth, and then the marketing side of me, I look for places that struggling veterans might be. So I'm in a lot of Facebook groups and forums for struggling veterans, and I'll see someone get on there and make a post, hey, I'm not coping with life well, and I'll just comment, hey, come to this retreat, it's free. So we've gotten a lot of people off of Facebook. And then generally people will come through and then they're like, oh, well, I know 3 more people that could really benefit from this. So we have a lot of walking testimonials. And, I'm sure that because we provide this at no cost to the veterans, that's really helpful too in getting people to come in.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Since you're a nonprofit, how does that where how do you try to find your donors and what does that whole process look like trying to
So that's where the real challenge comes in for me as the founder and director. How do you go to someone and ask them to give you money for a service that they're never going to receive, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not the same as selling widgets or selling services.
Mm-hmm.
So that has undoubtedly been the biggest challenge of my entire life, 100 times over. But I feel like this year it's gotten easier. And so we've had a ton of support from the American Legions and the VFWs and the Legion Riders. So military support organizations are kind of where I started, because I'm like, okay, well, who is passionate about helping veterans and doesn't need a service or product in return?
Mm-hmm.
And so probably the first 4 years that we were in existence, the Legions and the VFWs were accounted for 90% of our funding. So that's, I'll be forever grateful to them. Obviously, as we grew, the need for money grew. And so we have really built this organization in a unique way. A lot of nonprofits will come up with their plan, and then they will go solicit grants, and they won't do any of the work until they have the money to do the work. And, this is a really horrible pun, but I say, like, I like to put the cart before the horse.
Oh, wow. She did it.
How I've run this business, really. But it was like, and I don't recommend this, but it was really like, I see a need, I have the tools to help, I'm just going to go help, and then have faith that the money will come. Not a good strategy. It did.
Interesting.
It somewhat worked, but so it's really just about, I call it kind of finding apple trees, right? Where's, I can go ask 100 people for $10 to support the veterans, or I can go somewhere where I know people are already supporting veterans, and my likelihood of helping them is going to be much greater. But there's a lot of businesses in Toledo that employ veterans.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a program where a business can send one of their veterans and they can sponsor the fee to attend the retreat. So they're getting, they're helping someone that they personally care about, but they're also getting back a better employee.
Yeah.
That's going to have impact in their organization. So we are privately funded. We have not ever received a large grant, and most of our funding comes from corporate and then Legions, and then we do get a lot of community support. I didn't do a good job of doing nonprofit market research. I just got really passionate and I just took off. And so it really wasn't until the past 5 years that I started getting into actual fundraising strategy. It's made a lot of difference. But we hold 2 fundraisers a year, and then we do the business, we solicit businesses to sponsor their veterans or any veteran really. And then one of the things we implemented last year is when someone enrolls in the retreat, we've created a crowdfunding link. And so if they want to try to fundraise for some of their tuition, it's kind of already a pre-done for them. All they have to do is post the link and it will put their name and their information in. And so they can try to fundraise. And then at the last day of the retreat, when they come through, we give them another link that says, hey, if you thought this was a great experience for you and you'd like to give this to someone else, please post this on your social media with a testimony of what you feel like this program did for you. And so that's been going well. In this sector, you can't put all your eggs in one basket. You always have to have lots of different streams because they can dry up at any time. When COVID hit, we lost 80% of our funding gone.
Really?
Yeah. We had just fortunately done a really large campaign, so we had money in reserve. But if we had just relied on everything that that we were relying on and we hadn't done that big fundraiser, we wouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of moving parts and pieces.
Mm-hmm. So I know you just touched on COVID, but were there any other challenges with COVID? Were you deemed an essential business or not?
Yeah, we were not deemed either way. So because our programming, we just have the 7 retreats and then we have like a Wednesday night meeting. We put that to Zoom. So that really wasn't a big deal. That actually worked out better for us because we had more people from out of town actually join and when we went virtual. But we did have to cancel 2 of our retreats. So it did impact us in that way, during quarantine and things. And then for the rest of the year, we just had smaller groups so that we could socially distance everyone. But, I don't know if I'm the best person to talk about the bad side of COVID, really, because, obviously there's a lot of horrible things associated, but we somehow had our best year ever in 2020. And, I really think a lot of that's because, the best business model is to find a pain and solve it, right? So obviously the pain that we solved became a lot more real in 2020. And I think, people that had not really experienced trauma experienced a lot of trauma, and not necessarily through car accidents or things like that, but, just being under a high amount of stress for an extended period of time can result in changes in your brain. So, we jokingly said, I feel like 2020 is the year that we've been training for the past decade, because that's what we do. We help people cope with trauma.
Yeah.
So, not that we'd ever want to capitalize on anything. It's not like that, but it's more to say hey, we have a solution to this really big problem. We can teach you how to take what happened to you that was traumatic, get a new perspective on it, and actually use that to have a better life and help people.
Yeah. No, it's just a result of an unfortunate circumstance.
Yeah.
You can't predict that type of thing. So
no, never. Yeah. Nobody ever could have predicted this craziness. But it's just we also, I think a lot of nonprofits threw in the towel this year. And one of the things that we tried to look at is, yes, there's a lot of places losing money. We used to source all the food for our retreats from restaurants and donations.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to walk into any restaurant in 2020 and ask for free food.
Yeah.
They were already struggling. But we ended up getting a $20,000 donation from a company called Betco, who makes hand sanitizer. They reached out and they were like, hey, we have a surplus, our products are flying off the shelf. And it really brought to light, yes, even though a lot of businesses are struggling, on the other side of that, toilet paper companies are doing really well right now.
Yeah.
So let's find the people that are essential. We had another company called H.O.O.V.E.S. They make software for the government. And during COVID, their business quadrupled. And so they gave us $20,000 last
Yeah.
year. So again, it's fundraising is always strategic, and you're always kind of trying to take the path of least resistance. So when you qualify people, it's like, well, who supports veterans? Who has money? Who supports horses? And who wants to be involved in a really good cause? And
Yeah.
then we try to really give people a lot of advertising value as well.
What are some of the outlets for veterans once they become a civilian? Are there many outlets? And if there are, can you name some?
Yeah, so this is tough because I think, it really, how you deal with transition is really based on, again, like who you are at an intrinsic level and how aligned you are post-service with that. So, some people get out of the military and they go on to, become politicians or business owners or CEOs. And then some people get out and they just go down the rabbit hole. So that is a question that probably has multiple answers. And, I think there are a lot of, depending on where you're at, I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are passionate about helping veterans. But I don't think that there's a lot of support in helping them actually find out who they really are now. Because there's who you were before you joined the military, you're not that person anymore. And there's who you are while you were in the military, and you're not that person anymore. So I think once people figure out who they are, it becomes a lot easier to connect them with appropriate resources. But it really just depends on where you're at and how much work you're willing to put into transitioning.
Well, I mean, what you've done is solving a massive pain point, and it's very impressive. It's cool to see and to talk with you about how you're helping people, especially with this problem. And it's amazing to see that it might expand into other forms of trauma. So, do you have any other plans for Hoofs in the future as well?
Yeah, actually, I have a mentor and colleague that is from Australia. And prior to COVID, she spent some time with me here on my farm, and now she's back in Australia. So we're actually looking at opening up a chapter Hoofs for Australian veterans. And one of the things in my plan that I made 5 years ago was to become a global organization. Didn't ever think it would happen this soon, but I had it on the vision board, and it looks like 2021 might be that year. So we're working towards that. There's also a location in Kansas and a location in Montana that are also inquiring about opening up chapters. So, once I get kind of these new facilitators trained so that they can run retreats without me, then I'm looking at kind of leveling up and only teaching like train the trainer. So once I get this place running like a well-oiled machine, I'm going to move on, and then I'll be able to train people all over the country. And I'm not going to lie, I'm really excited to go to Australia. That's been on my bucket list since I was like 7.
Yeah, that sounds like a good time. I that's on my bucket list as well. As we kind of wrap up, could you give your biggest success and your biggest failure as an entrepreneur?
My biggest failure as an entrepreneur is all the times that I decided to not go all in. I see now that not going all in and not fully believing in myself and keeping that little piece of me reserved with that backup plan was probably the worst thing I ever did. So I would say the worst thing is not going all in. And I would say the best thing I ever did was just to switch my mind frame. I remember the exact moment that I said in retrospect, I've never gone all in. And in this moment, I'm done. I'm all in. And no matter what it takes, I'm not giving up. And I feel like that moment for me was the definitive moment that everything changed. And it wasn't, something I can really put into words, but it was like an energy shift inside of me. And it was like all of a sudden doors started to open. People started to randomly reach out to me. I started getting these speaking opportunities, and it just really all went from there. And I feel like the more in I've become, the more successful I've become, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. How can anyone who's interested contact Hooves or find Hooves on the internet?
Yeah, our website is Hoofs, H.O.O.V.E.S.US. And if somebody wants to contact me direct, my email is just amanda@hoofs.us.
Okay. Is there any other words you want to leave off on before we end this?
No, I don't think so, but I just want to thank you for this opportunity. I always love to be able to reach other entrepreneurs. And, if anybody watched this and was inspired or have any questions, please reach out to me. I love to mentor other people who are where I used to be, because I think we all have to stick together in this crazy entrepreneur world.
Well, I'm glad I got Hooves as the first guest because I saw what you were doing and I think it's very profound. Keep it up. I hope you make it worldwide and get in every possible country and every place possible.
Thank you
But
so much.
thanks for coming on. That wraps up the first episode of the second season with Hooves and Amanda Held. Once again, thanks for coming on. Hope everyone has a great rest of their day.